You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, episode number 196. Never give up, never surrender. Galaxy Quest.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood when we really should be working on that next draft. It's the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by three categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie's going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. Today's show is also sponsored by Indie Film Hustle Pro, our private and growing community for filmmakers and screenwriters. It was created for film creatives like you to meet, network, and support each other, learn from film industry experts, and to get the answers to your burning questions and more. The journey in this business is rough. There is no guarantee to success, but your chances of reaching your goals dramatically improve when you find others who are on the same journey as you and you work together towards a common goal. That is why I put together IFH Pro. Inside, you'll get professional networking, private and safe spaces to discuss the film business, access to advanced tools and education, up-to-date education, exclusive content not available publicly, access to IFH Pro workshops, webinars, special guests, and so much more. If you want to check it out, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/pro. Now, there's so many times that I've had filmmakers on the show and I've told stories about these kind of just cautionary tales of what not to do if you're going to make an independent film. One of them is to put your house up as collateral to make your movie or finish your movie, especially when you have a family of 4 or 5 at the time. Well, that's exactly what happened to today's guest. We have writer-director Adam White. Now, Adam wanted to come on the show to be blunt and honest about, as he calls it, his failure with his first film, Inspired Guns. That became a box office flop. He lost everything, including his house, and it took him 7 years to bounce back and make another feature. And we're also here to talk about his new feature, Funny Thing About Love, which co-stars Jon Heder from Napoleon Dynamite fame. And we talk about how he cast that film, how he got the financing for it, how he started production without having all the money in place, how he was able to secure distribution, how he was shooting and casting through a pandemic. And just, we go into what the insanity of what had happened to him was, that when he lost everything, when he was literally back in living with his parents, with his wife and kids for 8 months while he built up his life again, the only thought he thought was, oh God, I'm never going to be able to make a movie again, which is absolute insanity. So we go into the kernel of what it is to be a filmmaker, an insane filmmaker, because I've always said we all are insane for doing what we do, but yet we love doing it. And Adam's story really personifies this without question. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Adam White. I'd like to welcome to the show Adam White. How you doing, Adam?
Thank you.
So thank you so much for reaching out, man. It is I get pitched on a daily basis for filmmakers to come on the show, and I'm always looking for stories that can inspire and teach about the process. And you definitely have a story like that.
Yeah, I hope that my pain and suffering can be someone else's inspiration, and they can learn from my mistakes, and not repeat them.
Talking from somebody who's gone through a lot of pain and suffering, has a lot of shrapnel himself. This is my bread and butter. This is all I do all day, every day. Show my pain to help other filmmakers. But first, before we get going, man, how did you get started in the business?
Oh man, that's a great question. I had a brother who's 5 years older than me, and my whole childhood, he was like, I'm going to film school at UCLA. I'm going to be a screenwriter. And I didn't know what that meant. And I was like, that's a thing. You can go to school for that. And he had just graduated high school and was he was taking a couple classes at junior college, getting ready to go to UCLA, and ended up dying in a car accident.
Oh man, so sorry.
Yeah. And so that it just kind of was always on my mind of, just and from his memory, my memory of him, I was 12, he was 17 or 18. And, I always just was kind of like the screenwriting thing was always on my mind. And then as I got into high school, I started I wrote an episode of Seinfeld just for the fun of it, because I thought, I just had an idea and I thought that'd be funny, and thought this would be cool. I should write movies, and then as I got into college, I was like, maybe I should go to film school, and did that. Went for 3 weeks, but I already had 2 kids and a wife, and they were like, you'll never make any money if you have a family already. Don't do film school. You're crazy. This is my advisors at film school. And so I'm like, well, I also like entrepreneurship, so maybe I'll go get a business degree instead. But I was writing scripts at the time and going, I'll come back to this. I'll come back later on when I can do it, when things are a little more financially secure, when I have kids and, need to take care of them. So it was kind of a weird way to kind of get, meander through that, but.
Yeah, and so then you decided to make your first film, Inspired Guns. How did that come to be?
Well, yeah, so I started a business. I had done multiple online businesses, and what I found is if you're a writer and want to be in filmmaking, like probably the best crossover is to get into do an internet business that has to do with that kind of uses search engine optimization as like the main traffic for the website, right? And because Google loves content, and I figured that out, that I could create content that Google would consume, and I would rank higher in Google, and I would get traffic, and I could make money. And so over the next, I think it was 5 or 6 years, I just built these internet businesses, and then I sold many of them, and I had a big one that I sold, and it was like, okay, that was big enough to where I can now for the next 2 years just do film. And see what happens, right? So I started volunteering on movie sets just to learn how a set ran. I started making short films. I did like a short little web series and a couple other short films, and got to the point where I'd met enough people in the industry, and I was like, okay, I think at this point I'm ready to make this film. And I had written it 10 years prior to ever filming it. It was the first one that I wrote. I had written others since then, and I went back and really, I sent it to some people I trusted and said, all right, you guys just rip this thing apart, because I don't want, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure it's a good movie. And so we went through many revisions, and then I was like, all right, let's make this thing. I had a former business partner that I pitched and said, hey, do you want to be involved? And he did a small investment, and then his current business partner also did a small investment. And so we were kind of on our way. And I'm like, you know what? If I don't do this now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I have the funds that I could make this happen. That was the whole point. Mm-hmm. So I just financed the rest myself. So that was kind of how that came to be.
Now, from what you told me, the film wasn't a blockbuster hit.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
It wasn't a blockbuster hit. So what actually happened with the release? Why do you think it failed? Because it was a very kind of niche, it was a mix of 2 niches. It was kind of like spiritual, but yet with the mob and funny and comedy.
Yeah. It was probably the worst possible niche you could choose, I assume. But, and the title, every time I tell somebody what the name of the movie is, Inspired Guns, 2 seconds later, they're like, what was it? I can't remember. I mean, they can never remember the name. So that also didn't help. But yeah, it was, it didn't go well. We didn't have traditional distribution, right? I essentially became the distributor on the movie, and I had no experience doing that. So there was a theatrical consultant in that niche, it's a very specific niche. And
Mm-hmm.
I was in Utah at the time, and out of Utah, there's a lot of films that kind of do the same thing where they'll just release locally in Utah because it's a specific audience there. And so you do a theatrical run throughout Utah, and there's been movies that have done, 7 figures doing that. Right. So it's it can work. And there was a film that released just 3 or 4 months before mine did that was also kind of in the same niche, but not comedy, that had done really well. And so it was, I was hopeful and thought, okay, this can really work if we do this, just follow the same model. But yeah, as I did that theatrical run, the price like doubled in terms of my investment, which I knew I had to take a big shot if I was going to have a chance to succeed. And unfortunately, that meant I also had to like really leverage the money that I had and my home on that.
Wow.
But that was the only way to make it work, right? And I just kind of found myself in a position where if I didn't do that, I knew it wouldn't succeed, and I would have lost all the money anyways. So
then you decided to, instead of just lose the money you invested, you actually put your house up as well.
Yeah, so I basically just did because at that point I owned my home because of the business sale, right? And so I just took that money and did a home equity line of credit to pay for everything we had to do. And, everyone's like, you're crazy, you're stupid, you shouldn't do that. And I'm like, well, no, this is going to be a huge hit. What are you talking about? It's going to be fine. There's no risk here. It was the
delusions.
First time filmmaker blinders were just like in full effect. Right. So yeah, so I did that. And as when you do a theatrical release, you have to pay for all of the promotion of everything, the movie, right?
Oh, yeah,
the commercials, everything. The billboards.
Did you four-wall it, or did you partner with the theaters?
We partner with the theaters.
Okay,
yeah.
So at least you didn't have to pay for the 4-wall, but you did have to pay for all the marketing, so radio play and posters and other things like that.
Exactly, all of that, and it essentially almost doubled the investment, right? In terms of the amount to make the movie versus to promote the movie is basically the same price.
Wow.
And and we did have distribution set up for DVDs, like that was all set, but they had no interest in doing the theatrical, and that's why it kind of fell on me to do that. And then the first week of the release, our DVD distributor does a press release that the movie's coming out in a couple months on DVD. And so half of the theaters saw that. It was the Cinemark theaters. They saw that and they said, well, we don't want your movie anymore because you did that, because you just told everyone when the movie's on DVD. So we're pulling you. So after 1 week, they pulled us, which destroyed any chance we had in half the state to be successful. So it was just, one thing after another that just, went bad.
Wow, man. And is it true? You said it. Did you lose your home for this?
Well, yeah. So we got to the point where I had no income, right? Because I stupidly sold everything off and then leveraged myself to the hilt essentially. And then, so it was like, well, I can try to get a job but when I did that, I still thought when DVDs come out, there's a chance this will be successful. So we'll sell the home so we can start paying back the loan. So we can pay back the loan. And we still had a little bit of equity left over, but not much, not enough to do anything fun with, but, to live off of for a little bit. Anyway, so I was like, we'll sell that. We'll live off the money until the DVDs hit, and then we can see where we're at. Right. And I thought this can still be successful. The DVD sales can still make it work. And then reality set in about 2 or 3 months later, where I was like, yeah, there's no cavalry coming to rescue me. We're pretty much in big trouble at this point. And
you're married at this point. You have a family at this point?
I had 6 kids at this point.
Jesus Christ, man. Oh yeah.
So I was in my mid 30s, had been very successful business wise, and had to move back home with my parents for 8 months. And my wife was pregnant, by the way. So she was not happy about the situation, although she's been very supportive. And supportive.
Oh man, you got an angel with you, brother. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Trust me, I have one of those myself, who've supported me through all my insanities over the years. It's so funny because when I was starting out in my career, the concept of making a feature when I was in my 20s it was too expensive. There was no digital technology. It was all film still. We were still in like mid 90s or so. So it was just too expensive. So what I did was commercials. So I spent $50,000 on a commercial reel, and I just borrowed. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. And then I started shipping out 3/4 inch tapes, FedEx overnight to every production company so that's my marketing. So it's 50 grand plus all my marketing. And I'm just credit card. I'm like, one or two jobs. I'm back, baby. It's just, I just got to go nothing. Crickets. And then the thing happened with the Mob, which was the movie that I almost made, which then brought me all the way back down to almost bankruptcy. So I went down a similar path, not as extreme in different ways than you, but it just goes to show. And I hope if there's a young filmmaker listening right now, just listen to two old farts talking about what the delusion's strong, man. The delusion is so strong. It's that lottery ticket mentality I always talk about, where you're like this, oh, I'm huge. You were like, oh no, I'll just mortgage my house.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. DVD sales will save us, it's this, and you just start talking yourself into it, and you get deeper. And I've seen that happen many times with filmmakers who aren't married, don't have families. When you're younger, you can get away with that kind of stuff because you're like, oh, I'll eat ramen, I'll sleep on someone's couch. But when you get 6 kids, dude, like you were taking a huge swing, and many times you strike out, and it's.
Frankly, it never crossed my mind that it was a huge swing. People would even tell me, and I'd be like, "They don't know what they're talking about." They're wrong. I'm going to be different.
You have no understanding my genius, and obviously someone's going to see my genius, and it's not going to work out. And that's unfortunately not the reality. It happens for 1 out of 1 million, 1 out of 2 million filmmakers. Is those stories, those stories that we all hold on to, the Robert Rodriguez story, the Ed Burton story, these kind of stories of like the lottery tickets. But that was an extreme. Your story is extreme. Because I saw the trailer for the film, and it definitely looked professional. It wasn't like a complete mess. It looked awesome. You had the potential for success. There was no, it wasn't like you were so delusional that you didn't even know how to, light a movie, because I've worked with those filmmakers, or direct a movie. It's professionally done. It just so happened that the way the chips fell, they didn't fall in the way. It could have very easily gone the other way. If the DVD guy wouldn't have put that out, maybe you would have had a run at the theaters. Maybe you would have made some money back. Did you ever see any money from DVD or no?
A little bit. One thing I did do, which I'll explain later, was the smartest thing I could have done, was any money that I got back, I immediately paid back the other 2 investors with interest, and
Smart.
Didn't take a penny myself, because I wanted to make sure that they stayed happy. And plus I had a personal relationship with them and wanted to make sure nothing, even though they're both very wealthy, I still didn't want there to be any hard feelings or whatever. So I did that first. I've definitely recouped some, for sure. I remember when I first got it on Amazon Prime, because I owned the digital rights to it, and I put it on Amazon Prime, and I think it made like $9,000 in the first month it was on, or whatever.
Back in the day when you could do that.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm back in business, baby. If I do this every month, I'll be fine, and then of course it dropped off very quickly.
The delusions, even then, you're like, look, $9,000. So if I do $9,000 a month, that means I'm going to make almost 100 G's. I'm going to make over 100 G's. I'll make my money back. I'm back, baby. And then of course the universe just goes, sit down.
Here's $200. How's that sound? Is that enough to feed your family of 9?
Jesus. So what I always find is fascinating as well is, and I've talked about this on the show multiple times, is the disease of being a filmmaker. It's a disease. It's this thing that once you get bitten by that bug, you can't let go. So after this colossal, lack of a better word, failure. Okay. I don't want to beat you up on it, because we all go through shit. But this failure, in the back of your mind, most people would lick their wounds. I'm like, I'm out of this. I'm gone. Let me just go back to what was making money. I'll go back to being an entrepreneur, build out some more businesses, and move on with my life. Maybe I'll make a short film every once in a while for fun. But yet in the back of your head, you're like, how can I get back? And that's the insanity that we are as filmmakers. You're just like, I just took a beating from Mike Tyson in his prime in the ring. and I was about to die. I was on life support, and you're like, when can I get back in the ring?
I want a rematch.
I want a rematch. So then it takes you how many years before you are able to get back in the ring?
Yeah, I mean, it was a dark time. I'll tell you what. I had those thoughts of. I mean, you know what the worst fear for me was throughout that whole thing. I mean, other than being financially destitute, which sucked, obviously.
with a family of 6 or 7 at the time.
Right, exactly. Like that once the money ran out from the equity in the house, that's when it got really, really low. But even then, it was like the biggest fear for me was I may not ever get to make another movie again.
Not that you won't eat. Not that you won't eat.
Yeah, exactly. I could get on government assistance and eat, but I couldn't. I was like, I might not make another movie. And that to me is like the worst of all of this, right? So everything from then on became, how do I get back to a point where I can make another movie? And so I did do exactly that. Like I went back to my roots and said, okay, I know I can build up some more businesses and just get to a point where I can breathe again. And then, because again, taking care of my family is number one, right? And so that's what I did. I got back into the internet business stuff, and then I just got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm feeling great. Things are going good again. It took 5-6 years to get to that point though, where it was like, all right, I've recovered to a point where I can start doing this again, and it was a long period. It was tough. I'd actually say it was probably 3 years before I really hit that. It took me about 3 years. And then over the next couple of years, it was like, all right, now I'm going to start looking into this again. And, without the risk of, financial ruin again.
Right. I'm assuming during this time you've had a conversation with your wife going, hey, I know things are bad, but we're going to get back up. And then how did you approach the conversation of like, I'm thinking of making another movie?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, because I've seen that. I've had these conversations. So I know, like, how did it go?
Yeah. She is very, very supportive. She wasn't as supportive the second time around. Like, it wasn't like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm there with you. And let's, but at the same time, my income grew to a point where she's like, all right, yeah, go ahead and do another movie, But I said, look, I'm going to do it different this time. First of all, I'm not going to pay for it myself. That's the number one thing that I learned. And, and then that takes away all the risk, right? There was huge risk because it was my own money, right? Now, frankly, I look at that as my film school. Like that whole experience, it cost me a couple $100,000, right? But that was my film school. Like you could not have gotten that good of a learning experience in 4 years of school. There's no way.
No way.
You know what I mean?
In 10 years of school, you couldn't have gotten that.
Yeah, you couldn't have.
Yeah.
So yes, if I think of it that way, it's not nearly as painful to swallow what happened.
Right.
But at the same time, nobody wants to fail like that, right? Like it's not fun,
Mm-hmm.
Living with your parents and when you're 35 and have kids is not fun.
I can't even comprehend that, my friend. Yeah. I feel you. I feel you hard because I just go visit my parents and I'm like, yeah, no. No, that
yeah, 8 months. My wife's like, all right, that's it. We're done. I can't do it another day. I'm like, okay, let's get out of here. We had to just figure it out at that point.
And one of the reasons why I wanted you on the show is because I wanted people to really see this is the real life. This is what they don't show you at film school. This is not what Hollywood, puts out there for filmmakers to see. They only put out the stories of like the Sundance winners and the lottery tickets and the Palm Springs sold for 17.5 million. And that's what they show. They don't show the realities of it. And I mean, on the show, I've had multiple filmmakers go through what you've talked about, not exactly like you. And I've gone through my own headaches as well. Yeah. So I've got shrapnel just like you. But what I found fascinating about your story is that it is truly insane. And we are insane to go, I just got my ass beat and I'm going to go back and then that your thought process was like, the worst thing that could happen is I can never make another movie. There's something so primal within the artist that you're like, if I can't create again, it is worse than death. Almost. It's a weird thing that we have as filmmakers. Unlike writers, unlike painters, unlike musicians, their art is cheap.
Yeah.
Ours is not.
This is the most expensive hobby in the history of Earth. That's what it was for me the first time around anyway.
Right.
So frankly, and ironically, while I was during the downtime of like the 3 years of like trying to recover, I wrote a youth fiction novel because it was like the one release I had. It was very hard to be creative at that time because,
Oh, no, I know.
In all honesty, I was depressed, super depressed. And so it's hard to be creative when you're depressed. But somehow I was able to write this book, and like that was like the therapy that I needed to just get me through that time, and then until I get to a point where I go like, all right, let's think about making movies again.
Yeah, trust me. I was hiding in a garage sorting comic books for 2 years after my near bankruptcy, and my whole life went down the hills with that shooting for the mob scenario. So I feel you, bro. I feel that. So all right, now like the Phoenix, you are rising again. So tell me about your new film, Funny Thing About Love.
Yeah, so I just, during the pandemic, my wife loves Hallmark movies, first of all. And like, I've seen 100 of these things, and oh my gosh, it's like torture for me every time I have to watch one with her. There's probably 3 out of 100 that I was like, okay, that was all right. Yeah. But I'm a huge fan of like the romantic comedies from the 90s, like While You Were Sleeping, or, You've Got Mail. Like, those are like iconic movies. And I'm like, why don't we have any movies like that anymore? Like, they don't make them. They don't exist. And so I was like, you know what? I can do way better than Hallmark for me personally, like as a man watching this. And I want to do something that's a throwback to that era, right? Of like, you have good romantic comedy, but you have these awesome supporting characters that just make it super funny, right? Like that's how all of those were kind of modeled. And they're all family friendly too, which is a good thing for me. Anyway, so I started writing one, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, dude, I have all this extra time. We're on lockdown. I'm just going to finish this thing. And I busted it out really fast. I was writing like 5 to 10 pages a day, and and the characters just came alive. I've written 5 or 6 screenplays, and this one was like the easiest to write of all. Maybe it's because I'm a family man or whatever, or because I'd seen so many Hallmark movies. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But whatever it was, it came really easily, and it went through very few revisions. And and then once I had it done, I'm like, look, this movie can be made for pretty cheaply, right? We could do this for less than $1 million for sure, probably less than $500,000. And so I had some producer friends, brothers that are producers, and I was like, hey, let's make this thing. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So during the pandemic, during the lockdown, we like literally started going and looking for money, and that's when me taking care of my investors from Inspired Guns really paid off, because I went back to those guys and I'm like, hey, I'm doing another one, guys. Finally, you want in? And they're both like, yeah, I'll go again. Right. Because they were happy. It was a good return for them. So
sure.
And they both went in higher than they did the first time. Right. So now I had more money than I did the first time to start. And nobody wants to be first with investors. That's what I found out.
Nobody wants to come to the party first.
1 or 2
to
say yes. Then it's so much easier to get other people to say yes. And that's what happened. I happened to mention to some friends of mine, some neighbors, I'm like, yeah, I just got our first or 2 investments in the movie. And then like 2 days later, one of them approached me at the gym. He's like, hey, tell me more about this movie. How do I get involved? And then he drops, $50,000. And then,
wow.
And then another neighbor is like, well, you're doing this movie? Tell me more about this. And then they end up investing about $50,000. It's just like a snowball effect.
Wow.
So then we're like, we got to make this movie. So we just went in like the full pre-production mode at that point. And
so good. So
it was like divine providence. I'm like, I can't believe how easy this is happening compared to the previous experience, right? Where it was just like torture.
Yeah, I think the universe was like, okay, we beat him up enough. Let's give him a little bit of an easier road. It's still going to be tough, but let's just give him a couple of.
Let's make it. Yeah, there was definitely no doubt in my mind that I should make the movie. Right at that point, when you have that much money, when you have over 6 figures of for an indie film that's people have committed, and we had the cash. Like we immediately made people pay like right away, so they wouldn't back out on us. And, we're like, let's do this, man. We got to make this movie.
So you're in the middle of pandemic, and, I get pitched all the time about like, hey man, I made this movie in the pandemic. I'm like, that's nice. I did 3 shows of that. I'm good. But your story about not only your Inspired Gun story, but then you're also shooting during the pandemic, which has it has a couple of added stresses.
Yeah. Well, we knew we had to do it quickly, right? Because if anybody gets COVID, you get shut down, right? So you can't.
And where'd you shoot it? You shot it in Utah?
No, Arizona. I'm in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to stay close to home. This is my hometown. So we shot here in the Phoenix area.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
But we all right, we got to shoot this in 12 days is what we said. So we did it in 12 days, which to me is, the first
insane.
Inspired Guns was, I think, 20 days, right? And that seemed fast. So 12 days to me is insanity, but I know people have done it faster, but it was not enough time, but we were able to do it somehow. We finished, but even then we were testing everybody three times a week. Everyone had to wear masks except the actors, It wasn't very fun for that part.
Yeah,
of it.
it was pre-vaccination. It was pre-everything. Like it was still on a weird. The world is still coming to an end kind of scenario.
Yeah.
And again,
January.
and on top of that, it's the craziness of, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I gotta shoot my movie. Like that's the other insanity that we have as filmmakers.
I better do it quick before the world ends, otherwise I won't get to.
Yeah, it's like, do you see I really want to just spotlight how insane. And you're not the only one. I'm the same way. We're all the same way. But it's just like, I want to just stop for a moment and just live in that moment. It's like, I gotta hurry and shoot this before the world ends.
I do not want to die not having filmed this thing.
It's like, I need to get this out of me. I don't want to die with the music in me.
Exactly.
So you're shooting this thing. You shoot it. Let me ask you, what was the toughest day on set and how did you overcome it?
The toughest day was, well, they're all long days, right? Because we're shooting 12 days. So we're like 16-hour days every day. But the toughest day was we had two outdoor shoots because the movie takes place over the Thanksgiving holiday, and we had an outdoor walk, and we also had a football game that we had to film. That part was difficult because I didn't realize that no one in the cast had ever played football in their lives. They had no idea what the rules were. They didn't know
what is this thing? What is this ball? What is this? I don't understand.
Yeah. So then I'm sitting there like I didn't factor in time to teach them the rules of football. Like I didn't I was a part of this. So then I'm like, as quickly as I can, like, all right, you just line up here and run that way, and you line up here and run this way, and you stand next to that person and make sure they don't get the ball. It was chaos.
That's insanity.
And so that made it go longer. Then the police showed up and said, hey, you guys aren't supposed to be here. Then one of the homeowners associations people said, you can't be here. And we just ignored them. And we just got to hurry and finish this, So we just kept filming. And then our grip truck broke down and we had one more location to go to. So then we're move over to the other location. We don't have any of our equipment. They're like, what can we bring? What is the essential stuff we need to bring? So we bring that stuff over. We have our DP literally sitting in a wheelchair being wheeled around as our dolly because it was a hospital scene and we had a wheelchair there, so that was probably the hardest day, but and there was a choir practicing because it was at a high school. There was a choir practicing and they're super loud. We can hear them through the air vents as we're trying to film. So we have to keep waiting on them. And they're like, it's like these angelic voices singing, but we're like, we can't, that's great, but we can't use that. So we had to sit there and wait until they would stop singing, and then they'd hurry and film, and then they'd start singing again. So that was just one of those days where it seemed like everything was going wrong, and
But you made it through. Obviously, you got.
Yeah, we finished the day. Not everyone was happy about it, but I was.
When you've got it's always fun when you have perspective. Like your first experience with Inspired Guns, that shrapnel does give you a level of perspective on where you're at in your career. It's like when you're going through, like when the fit is hitting the shan, as they say,
yes.
And you're just there like, everyone's losing their mind because they haven't had your perspective. You're just like, I'm just happy to be here. Like, you
don't know how lucky we are, guys.
Isn't it insane that as artists, we really only get to practice our art for a short amount of time in our life? Unless you're Ridley Scott, who's on set 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and has a cot there or some shit. I have no idea. But generally speaking, most filmmakers shoot a movie once a year, if they're lucky, once every 2 or 3 years or 4 years. So to actually practice our art is so rare. It's most of the time is getting the project up and off the ground, getting it ready, casting it, getting the money, and then you get those 12 days or 20 days where you're actually directing, and then you're like, okay, now I'm in post, and post is part of that process. So it's, you feel that, but then Most of the time it's in distribution. How am I going to get my money back? How are we going to do this?
Oh yeah.
So you barely ever get a chance to actually direct. And when I'm on set, I'm just like, oh my God, it's just like, you just want to soak it all in because it's such a rarity to do.
It is. It's a rarity, but it's funny because when I did Inspired Guns, when I was on set, I thought, I have found the thing that I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life.
Sure.
This is the greatest experience I've ever had, outside of family and marriage and kids. Like, this is the greatest experience I've ever had, so that is what pulls you back. It's like, I've experienced that now. That's why for those 3 years, I'm like, I might not ever get that feeling again. Like, I found the thing I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life and I might not get to do it. It's been taken away from me. It was like hard, but so the 12 days, that was like the worst part about the film shoot was that it was only 12 days. Cause it was like, I just want to keep doing this. The next one, I'm going to go for 24 days at least, just so I have 24 days to do it. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you get that feeling for 24 straight days and then you go into the rest of, into business mode to market the movie. But yeah, you're right. It's that feeling of when we're actually doing the art form, it's such an amazing feeling. You just want it to last forever.
And by the way, that's with as an indie filmmaker as you can get, making a $5,000 movie, to guys who are making $30, $50 million movies, $100 million movies. Those guys, they get on set for a few months. Like if you're shooting a Marvel movie, you're shooting a Marvel movie for 2-3 months, and you're 3 years in development. And in post, like doing all the visual effects and all this, it's just so weird. As I always tell people, I'm like, I wish I could just be a musician. I wish I could just pick up a guitar and play, because that's why sometimes you just see a musician like thrumming a guitar, just playing around, like, or a jazz player, just like, just jazzing it up,
They're happy as can be doing that.
And
because they're getting to do it.
Right. And we don't get that. We, as writers get to do that, but writers are different. It's just a different, writing a script, writing a book, it's a different feeling than being on set. And when you're on set, there is this energy, there is this magic, especially when you're the director, that it's addictive. It is a truly addictive process. Even if it's a bad experience, it's like pizza. Like, if you have the worst pizza, it's still pizza. Like, it's,
Yeah. I haven't had a bad experience yet. I mean, like, both experiences, I think maybe because they were both comedies, like, it was, people tell me, like, the film crew is like, this is such a fun set. Everyone's happy. And I'm like, I don't know any different. Like, I've never done a set where people weren't happy, where people weren't having fun, or people were getting yelled at. We never had, I've only done it twice, but I'm pretty, especially like you said, after the first one with the shrapnel, I'm like, oh man, everything's fine, guys. Just calm down. We're good. Like, nothing's bad here. We're so good. So
it's kind of like after Francis Ford Coppola did Apocalypse Now, everything else was just like, Yeah. It's like, I spent 3 years, almost killed myself in a jungle. I'm good.
Nothing else matters.
It's all good. It's all good. So it's all perspective. It really, really is. Now, I have to ask you, man. You have Jon Heder in your movie. For everyone listening, is it Heder, right? Is it Heder?
Yeah,
Heder.
Yeah,
so Jon Heder, for everyone listening, if you don't know, the name doesn't sound familiar. He was Napoleon Dynamite. He did Blaze of Glory with Will Ferrell, and he's been in a ton of like comedies, big budget comedies.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done a lot of stuff in his career. I know he does a lot of VO work and stuff like that as well. But he generally doesn't do supporting roles. So first of all, how did you get him? And then how did you get him to be a supporting role as well?
Yes, he doesn't do romantic comedies either. So there was 2 hurdles we had to climb. It really came down to, as we were casting this, and we had it fully cast, right? Except one role, we hadn't called the guy we were going to cast yet. Because I was like, because the whole time we're like, one thing I learned the first time is if you don't have a name in your movie, nobody cares about your movie. They just don't care.
It's rough. It's rough. Yeah.
So even if it's the greatest movie of all time, then maybe they'll, it may find its way. But other than that, people don't care. So I was like, all right, we had Barry Corbin, and he's been in, he was like the general in War Games and stuff. He's been in a ton of things, but even he wasn't a big enough name, I didn't think.
No.
So I was like, so we got to we're like just a couple weeks out from shooting, and I'm like, all right, we have to get a name in this movie, or else we're going to set ourselves up to fail. And this is just the business mind of me going,
of course,
I don't want to make the same mistakes again. So I literally went through IMDb and went through every male actor in that age range and made a list of like of 5 to 10 guys that I thought, okay, we might have a chance to get this person for cheap. And he was one on the list. Now, because like he and I went to the same college, right? And so we have some connection there. And I happened to, we had cast Brooke White. She was an American Idol finalist, and she had a supporting role in this. And we reached out to the cast and said, hey, does anybody know Jon Heder? And she's like, well, actually, I just shot a music video with him. And so I have his number. And we're like, okay, well, listen, we need you to just text him and just say, would you be interested in a rom-com that we're shooting? I'll be playing your wife. They're friends, right? I'll be your wife. It'll be fun. It'll be 2-week shoot during the pandemic. You have nothing else to do, right? So she texted him. He's like, well, send me the script. And if I like the script, I'll do it. And so I sent him the script, and he liked the script, but he's like, I don't want to be in a Hallmark movie. And so I had to convince him that it wasn't a Hallmark movie, that it was too much. There was too much comedy for it to be a Hallmark movie.
Right.
They won't want it. So he's like, okay. And so he's, yeah, I think it'd be fun. And so I think it just was a matter of circumstance, honestly.
And timing.
Yeah, the timing was just perfect, right? He had nothing else to do because of the lockdown, and so he's like, all right, well, and we obviously made an offer that was enough to incentivize him to come be in the movie and be the kind of the top billed actor.
How many days did you shoot him?
Oh, he was there all 12. Everybody was there all 12.
Really? So it wasn't a shootout thing. You had him all there for 12 days. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It really helped that he was friends with Brooke White, though, because they had the time. I mean, they had a blast together, and Brooke White's best friend, Summer Baless, is our lead actress. So it was just like a party for them, right? So it didn't feel like, it just worked out that way. It was just like perfect.
Wow. So the universe was really truly giving you an attaboy.
Oh yeah. Well, see that even like, and the actors don't even know this, but like, we hadn't raised all the money when we started. Right.
I was going to ask you, that was my next question. Like, you started shooting without all the money.
Yeah, we did. And I was like, okay, we've raised this much so far. Everything's worked out. The universe is aligned for us. We're just going to go for it. I'm just going to take a step into the darkness, and hopefully the way gets lighted. Yes, I see now that even then, like, again, the blinders are on, and I'm like, oh, we'll get it. We'll be fine.
That could have been, man, okay. So everyone listening, don't ever do what Adam did. Don't ever start production without your at least your production budget. You might have to go find post. That's fine. But don't ever do what he just said he did, because it's not wise. Because again, and even after your experience, this was a part of that experience that you didn't have the first time. You're like, oh no, everything's working out fine. We got Jon Heder. We're going to get going. It's going to be fine. We'll just keep going. So what happened?
Well, okay. Now, to be fair, we had the money for production, but then we had to go through the Screen Actors Guild, right? Because that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And that opened up a whole other world of problems, right? Because for independent filmmakers, it is not easy to work with the Screen Actors Guild. And so they said, all right, you need to send us $80,000 of your budget as a bond to make sure the actors get paid. Well, we assumed, because I hadn't worked with the Screen Actors Guild before, I assumed that meant they were going to pay the actors for us, right? But that's not what that meant. They're just going to hold that money in case we don't pay the actors, then they'll pay them, right? But we still had to pay the actors, even though they had the $80,000 we were going to use to pay them. So we were like stuck because they had our money and we didn't raise more money. So we were like, what are we going to do? Because they said they're going to give our money back like 120 days after we're done shooting.
That's which is very convenient. Yeah, it's very convenient that way. Yeah, that's the way. The SAG is very convenient that way.
Yeah, it was fantastic, right? So. So that's why we were scrambling. It was like, all right, well, we were going to get through production one way or another, because they weren't going to get a check till the end of production anyways. They got the first check. The second one, the movie would have been shot. It's just that people would have been mad because they didn't get paid right away. So we were scrambling, and we just like basically begged the Screen Actors Guild and said, hey, look, that's our money to pay people, and we can't pay anybody if you don't give us our money back. And we had to escalate it, inside their organization to get them to finally say, all right, how much do you actually need? And we got the money back.
But it was like, okay, I get, I don't want to get into that conversation with SAG and that, because it's not, a lot of people think it's super easy to work with them for independence. It's not. It's
very hard. It puts you at a huge disadvantage too, because you can't get big actors without using them. So So it's like you have to have one with the other if you want to have a chance to succeed, and then they make it harder for you to succeed by doing stuff like that. But meanwhile, my producers, they were really good about. They kind of didn't let me know that this was even happening. They did a really good job of like shielding me from any of the external problems that while we were filming. So I didn't find out till after. But even then, they were raising money that whole week, like reaching out to people that they had worked with before and going, hey, we're doing this movie. It's got Jon Heder, and that again, getting a name was so important for that.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Because anytime we start throwing Jon Heder's name around, everyone wants to listen. Like, oh, really? You got Napoleon Dynamite? Okay, yeah, I'm interested, right? Like it's just amazing how many doors that has opened, and right now we're in the press phase of the film. We have a national PR company working for us, and he's getting booked on some really big shows. Him as a supporting actor in this movie is getting booked on really big shows because he's Jon Heder, right? So we're going to get some amazing national press, frankly, just because we have him in the movie.
That's awesome. And again, I've talked about this so much on the show, man. If you're listening, getting a name or a face at minimum is so important in the process, because you're right. Like when you're scanning through, if you're scanning through all those, your catalog, whatever it is, carousel, going back and forth on Netflix or on Hulu or on wherever you're seeing it, you're going to stop if you see a familiar face. Mm-hmm. Right. And Jon is one of those faces that people are like, oh yeah, I've seen Jon because he's been in a ton of stuff, and he's just been in a lot of big shows. So it's super, super helpful to do that, man.
Yeah, it really is. Napoleon Dynamite still, 17 years later, carries so much nostalgia, and it's just an iconic movie that people they love him so much from that movie that everywhere we went, it was like we had to stop people from taking pictures. In fact, I had to yell at him one time because he was taking pictures with fans that weren't masked, and I'm like, dude, you can't get COVID, man. Right in the middle of the shoot. I'm like, you cannot be talking to anybody until the shoot's over. The last day of the shoot, sure, take all the pictures you want, because by the time you get tested, we'll be done. But until then,
please,
you stay in a bubble. But, it really has made for an experience that we have a chance to succeed. I mean, I feel so much more positive about what can happen with this. Even the distribution deal that we got, which, I didn't know this, but most people don't get minimum guarantees.
You got an MG?
Yeah, we did.
Because of Jon?
Well, yeah. I don't know why.
It's because of Jon. Because this is how it works. You got an MG because the distributor saw Jon in it, and he goes, I can pre-sell that, or I already know I can make money with it because of Jon's face and name attached to it. And that's what people don't understand who are listening, or filmmakers who might be listening, is that distribution company in today's world is going to give you an MG unless they know there's a guarantee of that money. They've already sold it. So if I'm giving you $10,000, I already called up Bob over in the Netherlands, and I already know that Bob's going to buy this movie for $10,000. It's a done deal. So that's why that happened. Without Jon, almost positive you wouldn't have got an MG. It's just so hard. It's just too hard.
You could be right. I don't even like. It was interesting because it was Gravitas Ventures is who we ended up going with for distribution, and they emailed us. We weren't really, because we were going to do the same dumb thing I did last time, which was just do our own distribution theatrically first and then see what we do after that. And I started getting cold feet on that and didn't feel right about it. And I was like, I don't want to go to that same road again and have it fail, even though this movie has a much wider appeal. And then Gravitas reached out to us and they said, hey, send us a screener. I sent the screener like at 11 o'clock at night, and 6 a.m. the next morning, they offered, we want to distribute this. Here's what we'll do. Plus here's your MG. Like, it was like that fast that they were offering an MG to us. And I was like, wow, they love this movie. This is great.
Is the MG covering? It's not covering your budget, is it? But it's something.
No. I was able to negotiate more than double what they initially offered on the MG. It's probably about 20% of the budget. But even then, the fact that it was, we got it it's something. We know they're 100% committed to the success of the movie, right? Because they put their money, they're writing us a check right from the beginning. So.
That's awesome, dude. That's really
Yeah.
good. I'm glad for you. Well, you are a success story in the sense that you were able to bounce back after you got punched in the face hard. And you might have heard this on my show. It's like no matter who you are in this business, you're always getting punched. You're in a fight constantly. You're getting punched in the face all the time. But many of you don't even know that you're in a fight. So when that punch hits you, you're out for the count. You didn't know it was coming. You got knocked out, and then in your days, you're like, I got to get back in the ring, and we're able to work your way back to that and still be able to do what you love to do. And that is an inspirational story that I think a lot of filmmakers need to hear, because I talk to so many filmmakers on a daily basis that I just hear it I hear all these stories so often, and it usually ends in tragedy. It normally doesn't have an uplifting story. So that's why that's one of the things that caught my eye about your story, that you went down and then you came back up like a phoenix. And the thing is too, like, you didn't like win the lottery. You didn't like win an Oscar. You didn't get into Sundance. You didn't this is not that story, but you were able to get back to a place where you can practice your art. You could do what you love to do and hopefully make another one. And that's success enough. Hopefully you will have continued success. But as filmmakers, man, if you just get to make another one, get out, you've won.
Yes, I didn't really consider. I was always ashamed to call myself a filmmaker after the first one, right? Because I had paid for it myself, and it was only one movie, and they're like, no, anybody could do that if they had the money, right? But now that I've done two, okay, and I got other people to invest, where I didn't have to use my own money. All right, I'm a filmmaker. I did it, that's probably just a dumb way for me to classify myself, but just to maybe my own insecurity of talking about it, but. It definitely feels a lot better to know I came back again and I did it. And I've made a movie that I think people are going to really enjoy, and, is going to kind of meet that need of good family entertainment that you can watch together and feel good. And that's what we all need, is some good feel good stuff.
Absolutely. Now, if you would have thrown a puppy in there that saved Christmas, then you would really have something. But I'm sorry, you didn't.
Hey, there's time for a sequel. All right.
I always people like, what should I make a movie about? I'm like, if you have a puppy who saves Christmas, it's pre-sold.
You have a winner.
You have a winner. Puppy saves Christmas all day, every day. Put Dean Cain in it. Done.
Good to go. Yes.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
I think that it's, first of all, and I can't give any advice that not everyone else has given, I'm sure, but and people that are a lot smarter than me. But I would say you have to know that nobody cares about your stuff nearly as much as you do, right? And most people don't care at all about your stuff, right? So it's really a matter of how you can help other people and getting people on board with what you want to do. But having said that, once you get the ball rolling, like, just putting it out in the universe and saying, I'm doing this, it's amazing how people will jump on board, right? Mm-hmm. And want to be a part of something. So you kind of have those two things working against each other. Nobody cares, but once you're doing something and they know you're doing it, then they want to be a part of it. So, just like the great thing about filmmaking is, like, I didn't have to go to film school and I didn't have to get permission, right? Like, I could just do it. You can just make a movie. Nobody can stop you, right? And that's what's so amazing about it. Plus, it's so cheap now that anybody can do it. So yeah, I mean, just get out there and do, man. Just make it happen. Just the book. Speaking of Robert Rodriguez, that book was so motivational to me before I did Inspired Guns. Everybody who reads that book is like, you're like, okay, I can do this. I can make this movie. I only need 10 grand. It'll be fine. That's probably not true.
Which is the thing. I think it's the best and the worst thing. I love Rebel Without a Crew. Anyone who listens to the show knows I am a huge Robert Rodriguez fan, and that book has done, I think his story has done more good and bad at the same time, because he made everyone believe that they could do what he did. It wasn't his fault. It was the narrative. It was the story that they got put out there. Everyone talks about this. They still, to this day, talk about El Mariachi from 91. Like, everyone's still talking about that movie. Yeah. And the thing that most people don't understand is, like, you're not Robert Rodriguez. Like, he is a once in a generation kind of talent. Like, he is such a talented filmmaker. Whether you like his movies or not is irrelevant. It's how he makes them, the amount of talent, the amount of skills he has. Not everybody could do that.
Yeah, I think there's also timing and probably some luck, frankly. I mean, we all need luck to really, to get where most of those guys are. So it won't work for everybody because we don't have those things all working together in our favor.
Right, no question. And I've said this many times on the show before. If El Mariachi shows up today, does he even break through? Do we ever have do we have a Kevin Smith if Clark shows up today?
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't make it through the noise. But in the 90s, at that moment of time, it was destined to be what he became. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
I mean, I don't know that there's probably lots of lessons in terms of business that I could share, but taking care of the investors was a really, really good one. Getting a name actor was a really, really good one. I've literally I made a document where I said, here's all the things I learned from the second film shoot, right? Things that I want to make sure that I put into practice next time. And there's a lot of those things. But the biggest one was, no matter what, cast a name actor, no matter what.
Fine. Yeah.
Whatever you have to do to get a name actor, raise more money, whatever it takes, cut in other places so you can afford one, because that will make all the difference. Because they don't care, distributors and buyers don't care if the movie's good. Even
that's not even in the equation. Sell it. It's not even in the equation.
Exactly.
It's not even in the equation. That's the thing that filmmakers don't also understand, is that just but my movie's really good. Don't care. I can't sell it without Danny Trejo, without Jon Heder, without some face on the cover that I can sell. And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Well, we got these on the back wall. These are probably high on the list. I have the Fellowship of the Rings is probably my number 1 favorite movie of all time.
Nice.
Love the Bourne series, but it's probably Bourne Identity is the best of those. And then Toy Story, which I'm not a big animated guy, but I feel like that might be one of the greatest movies ever made.
I would agree with you. It is a pitch perfect film. Yeah. Story wise, it's and
the perfect story for that medium of CG animation, right? And they did it on the first try, which to me is unbelievable. So yeah, those 3 are good.
Yeah, that's not a bad combination. Bourne, Toy Story, Lord of the Rings. Yeah. That's not all good.
Give you a variety.
And where can people see the movie? When is it coming out?
So the movie comes out December 3rd. It'll be in select theaters, probably about 10 to 20 cities, and then also on demand the same day. So December 3rd, it'll be everywhere, essentially.
Adam, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us and dropping those knowledge bombs on the tribe. And hopefully it's some inspiration and some warnings will be picked up from this from this conversation. But I appreciate you, man. Thank you again. And best of luck to you in the future.
It's been very therapeutic for me. This is the first time I've really talked about that story publicly. So
I'm glad I could help.
Now I'll be able to sleep at night again. So this will be good.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
All right, man.
I want to thank Adam so much for coming on the show and dropping his knowledge bombs and sharing his journey with the tribe today. Thank you so much, Adam. If you want to get links to anything we spoke about in this episode, including how to watch his new film, Funny Thing About Love, head over to the show notes at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv/1896. And if you haven't already, please head over to screenwritingpodcast.com, subscribe, and leave a good review for the show. It truly helps us out a lot. And on a side note, guys, I just want to thank you all for listening and sharing this information that we have at Bulletproof Screenwriting, because it has become one of, if not the biggest, screenwriting podcast on Apple and Spotify. I've been seeing the numbers, and it is so humbling that the show has grown so much over the last couple of years. It has grown faster than I ever expected it to. So humbly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all the support. Please continue to share this information. I want to help as many screenwriters and filmmakers out there as humanly possible. Thank you again so much for listening, guys. As always, keep on writing, no matter what. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv.